All right, we are live. It is the first Wednesday of the month. Welcome to the Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout. We've got a great lineup today. We're going to continue our discussion on training at the company level that we started last month. We've got our co-host Aaron Heller back that had to miss last month, and Bobby with us as well. We've added another guest, Jarrod Sergi from Norfolk Fire Rescue in Virginia, as well as Steve Disick from Albany that's back, and Brian Zaitz from Metro West in Missouri that's back. So great lineup today, and we're happy to have you here on the first Wednesday, the training and ISFSI, International Society of Fire Service Instructors, Humpday Hangout. So without further ado, I'll kick it over to our elder statesman, our leader of the group here, Chief Halton, and let him talk about whatever he'd like to, and then we'll get back into it.
Elder is a kind term.
I always say that with the utmost respect, sir.
Let's hear from the old guy. Hey, well, thank you so much, and welcome to today's Humpday Hangout. And fascinating topic. You know, when we talk about company officer training, we're going to be selecting classes this week and over the next month, really, for FDIC, where we focus a lot on company training and company training classes. Probably something that we really need to delve into more robustly as a service, as an industry, because the company that trains together, will succeed together on the fire ground. And so much of what we do in training is diffused. In other words, an officer or a firefighter will take this class here, this class there, rather than coming together and actually doing some kind of comprehensive training. So, I think some of the things that you can do that are low cost, and I'll throw out a few quick plugs. We've got some great webcasts coming up. We're going to be having Jake Rhodes. He's going to be doing a webcast coming up. It's on the thing. We also have a drone thing on the 11th of August, which is going to be amazing. Using this technology to try to manage large events and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing where you can bring the group together, watch a presentation, and then kind of delve into it amongst yourselves, or while it's even on, and that is company level training. We always think of the didactic, hands-on, saws, ladders, etc., which is critically important. But there's also other avenues and things to think about doing together. Also, I think with the simulation stuff, and it'd be interesting to see people's thoughts on that today, about using simulations as a company rather than, some of the models today that I've seen is where the individual goes and participates in the simulation rather than bringing the whole crew together and working through a simulation so people can talk about their roles and responsibilities and things of that nature. And one of the earliest, I'll throw this in here for you guys to mull over, because I was just accused of being old. Emmanuel Freed wrote a really good book called Fireground Tactics, and I believe it was published in the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken, maybe late 50s, early 60s. But it's a neat book, and it's still fairly relevant today. As a matter of fact, it may be more relevant today than a lot of today's books, because he was very aware of weather and ventilation and controlling ventilation. But one of the neat things is that he used to do these pencil and paper simulations, if you will, kind of the early days of simulating. So it's a neat book. If you don't have it, I would highly recommend going to a used bookstore or Amazon, and seeing if you could find a copy of Emmanuel Freed. Really neat book, fun to read. Was still one of my favorites, and so it's a neat topic today. Thank you so much to everybody for being on with us today. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. The digital edition of Fire Rescue should have hit your in basket today, and if you're not getting Fire Rescue, go to the website and sign up. Make sure you visit Firefighter Nation and Fire Apparatus Emergency Equipment's websites today too, as well as Fire Engineering's. A lot of great information on there, and can't wait to hear from the group about company officer training.
Fantastic, Chief. Well, thank you again for having us. As I said, or maybe I forgot to at the top of the hour, my name's Brad French. I'm a lieutenant in Dayton, Ohio, and have the great privilege of serving on the board of directors for the ISFSI. A couple of other housekeeping items, and then we'll move on. I've got to give a little plug as well for the ISFSI Fall Instructor Development Conference. Is coming up in the end of September, runs September 27th through October 1st in Cincinnati. Chief Pegram's talked about it on previous months' webcasts as well. We're hoping to have a great turnout for that. We've got a fantastic line lineup. We've got our new training officer credentialing program that a pilot course of that has already run once, and we're gonna run it again in Cincinnati. We've got some hands-on training related to the Principles of Modern Fire Attack program. We've got a great lineup of a couple of days of conference speakers and a lot going on in Cincinnati as far as some cool social events. So really a neat thing to get involved in. If you've not checked it out, go to isfsi.org, click on education and then events, and take a look at the fall conference. So it's going to be a great thing. Another housekeeping item, as we go over the next hour or so here, if you've got any questions for the group, make sure you hashtag FETalk on social media. You can see Chief Halton's got his phone right there. He's going to be keeping an eye out on social media for hashtag FETalk on Facebook, Twitter, the different social media platforms. So if you've got something to ask us, we'll try to grab all those questions or comments and address them as much as we can as we go throughout. So what I'd like to do, since Aaron is back this month, and since we've also got Jarrod from Norfolk on that weren't a part of last week's discussions, so we can kind of move forward with some new stuff this week, I want to get their thoughts on some of the things we talked about last week. So I'm going to kick it to Aaron, and then he can kick it to Jarrod. Just give us some general thoughts on maybe successes and failures you've had at training at the company level, some challenges that you faced, and just kind of your general attitude and opinion on why company-level training is so important in the fire service. Aaron?
Well, hey, everybody. It's good to be back again. Sorry I missed last month. I was doing some training actually down in Louisiana. July is a wonderful time to be doing live burns in the bayou of Louisiana. So, you know, I probably would have been a lot healthier sitting here talking with you all. But company-level stuff is my bread and butter. I've been a company officer now since 16, 17 years in the career job, and had served as a volunteer company officer quite a bit. So in my estimation, if you can't get it right at the company level, it's going to affect the entire department. And it has to filter down from above, but the onus is on that company officer. It's on the individual company members to really, really strive to be better at that level. And when we see that level come together, we see it start to affect everybody in the department in general. So, you know, I've been very successful in several ways with that. We've got a pretty aggressive training program in my company. The guys get their assignments. They know what they're supposed to be training on. And some of them are very aggressive. Some of them need a little extra shove. But we've seen their performance improve as our training program improved. And, you know, it's structured, yet it allows for flexibility, and it allows for our guys to come up with things themselves and to really make their own push if they can. So I'm anxious to hear what else you guys have, and I'll certainly jump in places where I can. But, you know, like I said, it starts at the basics. It starts at the company level. Once we get that right, the department can really thrive. If we don't get that right, you're not only stagnant, but you're probably going in reverse. And, you know, duty, pride, tradition, all of it starts right there at the company level. So I've got some stuff to add. I just came back from the Fools Convention, so I'm all pumped up and energized. And, Bobby, I'm sorry we didn't see you there, but I understand you had a wonderful gift brought to the Halton family. So that is way better than hanging out with a bunch of us in Chicago. So I'll kick it back to you guys.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Jarrod, we'll kick it over to you and tell us a little bit about yourself, since you weren't on last month, and your role in the organization, and kind of go into your some general thoughts on company officer led training, or just training at the company level.
All right, well, thanks, Brad. So I've been out here in Norfolk for just over 11 years now. I'm a company officer assigned to a ladder company in our city's 1st Battalion, which is like the downtown area. So bigger station, I have four trucks there, a rescue company, the ladder, which I'm assigned to, an engine, and then a medic unit. So a lot of guys, 12 guys on duty at one time. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, just like Aaron said, when it comes down to the company level, you know, not that it doesn't matter, but, you know, the tone that is voiced from the top sometimes can differ. It's good, it's bad, but really at that company level, I mean, that's where it all happens, you know. You know, if you don't have a good training culture in your department as a whole, that's where it's going to start, you know, and that's where that momentum's going to go. You know, for me, my success has been, when it comes to training, is to keep it fresh and to mix it up. It's especially in a station like mine where I have to focus on, engine, ladder, rescue, EMS. It seems like there's always something going on as far as, training or what do we need to cover. So going back to the company officer again, I feel it's all on him or her. I had somebody tell me one time, if it's not important to you, it's not going to be important to them. So it comes down to your attitude and really your approach towards training. You guys mentioned having those challenging employees and some people not really having that desire to go do training. I've seen that, and I've seen it turn around. So sometimes I wonder, what was their past experiences? Did they have that officer who really didn't value training? Was it used as a punishment? Those kinds of things. So in my experience, I've been successful with mixing it up. Getting outside the station. You can only search the bunker room so many times before the guys remember it. And that's not always doable. Not everybody has buildings and acquired structures, so you got to do what you got to do with what you have, and I totally understand that. But for me, it's keeping it fresh, keeping it relevant to what you're doing every day, and again, setting the tone from the top as far as having that attitude as a company officer and setting the priority that training is what we need to be doing.
Yeah, it certainly has proven true in my career, and probably I would imagine everybody's, that passion is contagious, right? If you show that you care as that company officer, a certain degree of that is going to trickle down every time. And something else that just popped into my head that something you said made me think of, in budgetary times, of course, maybe we're not dealing with some of the intense budgetary issues that we had several years back, but nonetheless, oftentimes in larger organizations, if they do have a dedicated training staff, what is sometimes one of the first things to be looked at is a little bit of fat to cut, right? And I don't agree with that, but sometimes that can be the case. And if you have a situation where you can't get companies out of service to go to your training division or go to be able to fall off the line and go out of service for a while, then it's got to be, that slack has got to be picked up at the company level, and that's extremely important. So I'll tell you, we'll go maybe go back down the line again, and we'll get into some more specifics. We'll get into some new content today. We kind of talked in generalities a lot last week and kind of philosophical things about company level training and dealing with different employees. But what about some specifics, some specific drills or specific activities that you've done either recently or in the past that have been really successful, and why? Aaron?
Well, there's a few different things, I guess, that we focus on. My company, one of the issues that we face is that we're a special ops company. So we're part of a special ops group here in Hamilton Township that each of us is assigned a few different tasks for the most part that we're going to specialize in. So for us, getting ourselves to the special ops level was not an easy trick. So we had to really focus on that, and we looked at a lot of ropes and rigging things, and we looked at a lot of heavy rescue things. We stayed away from the water rescue because we're not the company that's set on the river. Although we go to assist those guys, it's not our forte. So we found that by focusing on what our forte really should be and looking at what we're going to be basically tasked with, or what our challenges are going to be, that's what we wanted to really focus on. So we've done a lot of things in high angle and low angle, and we've done a lot of extrication and heavy rescue type things to practice on. The concern that we have is, especially for the extrication, is getting the vehicles, getting everybody the time to get their hands on the tools and really mix it up. And then the other part is we don't have a full-time training division, so it's kind of me. So in that case, will they bring me in on OT? Am I coming in on my own time, to get with some of the crews who really, their captain wasn't the guy who should be instructing it. He could do it, but he shouldn't instruct it. So those are challenges that we found, and with the special ops stuff especially. I'm actually putting together a little article about sliding the floor and how we deal with sliding the floor in our firehouses. And just like great point made about Norfolk, you're in a house with an engine, truck, and rescue. We have to set those drills to those topics that we're going to be dealing with. So like I said, special ops has been something that I've been very comfortable with in saying that I think we've got some success. Our basics of engine work, that's what we do every day. That's our ins and outs. Not as often as we'd like to do, but that's our ins and outs. So stretching line, just getting line off the rig and trying to not do it as a dull thing. Going out to your shopping centers where you've got some tricky lays, or going out to your apartment complexes, notifying the manager and saying, hey, we're going to stretch a little hose out here. Nothing's on fire, no big deal, but we want you to know that we're doing this to protect you and your folks and your investment here. And so that's another one that, in fact, we will be running a bunch of leader line drills here in August, which I'm sure will make some of my guys really happy. So those are some of the things that we've been successful with.
Yeah, you bringing that up reminds me, and of course, one of the things I like to do for stretching lines, or at least practicing it, is something that I just read. I'm sure it's been written before and probably since, but something I read in a fire engineering article a number of years ago, just simply using a rope to replicate those stretches, at least for the purposes of pre-planning, right? And then, again, don't be afraid, as you said, Aaron, to drop some hose. Sometimes the guys at different times over the years have been kind of horrified. I'm like, all right, let's stretch a line in here. And they're like, well, we're in service. I'm like, I get it, brother, but I got 2 more hose lines on there. Don't be afraid. We can disconnect it and drive away if we get something major, and we've done that. We've left for working fires while we had some hose on the ground, and you just go back and pick it up later. But very important to have that, to do those hose deployment drills, whether you're just stretching for the purposes of pre-planning or to get them on the ground. So yeah, I always tell the guys, don't be afraid to get some hose on the ground. Even though you're in service, it's okay. It'll probably still be there when we get back after the fact. So Chief Halton, what do you think? Maybe some anything specific jump in your head from over the years that you really enjoyed as a company drill?
Yeah, I think the one thing you talked about, estimating distances, by using rope. There are a couple of articles in fire engineering about doing that. I think it was about 18 months ago. Brad, you're right, and it was a great article, and I've actually replicated it, and it was really cool. We went out and basically, pardon me, gave everybody 2 50-foot lengths of rope, which is easy to do, piece of cake, just cheap rope. And then we kind of did some ballpark stuff and said, hey, how many lengths do you think that is? And mostly what we were looking at was supply line stuff, because we were talking about dropping lines, and for we got some hydrant spacing issues out here, and it was really interesting to see how difficult it was for folks that hadn't done it before. Estimating distances is not as easy as it sounds, and things that affect it are time of day. Like at dusk, it's really tough at dusk. I screwed it up royally at sunset, and so I'm just throwing myself under the bus. Again, elderly, old guy with glasses. To me, I go,
seasoned.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, holy mackerel, Brad, you're bald. I'm just kidding. But so things like that affect us. But here's a drill that we did, which was really neat. And Jarrod probably be interested in this one. We used to do a lot of flow classes. I did a lot of flow classes. I was really predominantly an engine guy, and I was always fascinated by the pitot and internal friction loss in the engine, and then hose degradation. Most of the hose I worked with before we had a lot of extruded hose out there. Most of the hose I worked out there was cotton jacketed, rubber lined hose, which is fraught with a lot of issues in terms of delamination. Which basically what happens there is the rubber lining separates from the outer jacket, because the expansion ratios of those products are different. In other words, the outer jacket expands at a little bit different ratio than that inner rubber liner, and then the glue would come loose. That's what the delamination means, and you'd have eddies and ebbs, and that would cause some unusual friction loss in your hose. So we would take our stretches off, pre-connects, and then our other hose, and we would just flow it, get a target flow and flow it, and we check it with the pitot, and we'd look at our pressures, and then we would able to determine whether some hose was bad, or if we had internal friction loss in the plumbing going to that particular discharge. One of the things that was interesting, and we don't do a lot of, wonky kind of work anymore about our pumps, which back in the day they were a lot simpler. But the pickup sensors for the pressure gauges, they're supposed to be 4 inches from the discharge, which is still not really accurate when you think about your plumbing, especially if you look at your chick swan at the top of your hose bed. If you have a chick swan, which is that little device that allows the hose to be pulled, to the left side or the right side. Well, what's the interior diameter of that? It's not 2 inches like your plumbing's supposed to be. It's actually a reducer. It's actually much less than that 2 inches. So that's some friction loss right there. So if you just take a coupling and you just put a little die, just tap it with a die tool and put a little pressure gauge on there, you can see what the actual pressure gauge is right there after the chick swan, and then run your hose and put another pressure gauge either at 50 feet or 100 feet to see if you're having any pressure drop or what your pressure drop is, because you might be thinking, oh, it's 7 or 8 or 10 psi per section or whatever you think it is, and you might find out it's much less or it's much greater depending on the hose and the condition of the hose, and then also how much you're losing from what your gauge says compared to what you're seeing at the top of that hose bed on your pressure gauge. Really fun stuff like that. So you learn about hydraulics, you learn about pump operations. Everybody gets to put their hands on the pump. You get to play with the pitot, which is a really great tool. You get to talk about friction loss, and you also get to talk about nozzle reaction, because you got guys and gals on the line, and you can say, okay, here's the smoothbore nozzle reaction, and you know it's right around 79 pounds at your 15/16 at 180 gallons, and then you put them on your fog nozzle, whatever you have, automatic gallonage or fixed or adjustable, whatever it is you're using, and then you can talk to them about, okay, why is that less? And you can talk about how the water comes out through it and it hits the deflector and how that creates a back pressure. So it's really a fun day for a company officer and especially for an engine company to get people really connected with the tool. It's like I'm a gun guy, so it's like when you get a new weapon. I recently picked up a new handgun, and it was just a ton of fun, just breaking it down and putting it back together and breaking it down and putting it back together and breaking it down and putting it back together and seeing how the springs felt and checking everything. We need cops do that endlessly with their guns. We need to do it with our tools too. So think of your engine and your hose line as just a tool. Yeah, it's a beautiful, iconic piece of the fire service, but what do you know about the pump, and what do you know about the different discharges, and what do you know about that front bumper load? And yeah, it's really convenient, but what do you got to really pump it to? And then then you can get into managing, setting your pump up and working with all the electronics that are on it today and making sure it works. There's some beautiful equipment out there today, but you got to work with it. I can't stress how important it is for engine guys in particular to take the company out every single shift and do something connected, as Aaron said, either stretching, flowing, measuring, deploying. Do something connected with that. And if you don't understand how water moves through the system, then you don't know what you're doing.
That was tremendous. I actually really enjoyed hearing Chief talk about that. And I hate to sound all philosophical for a second, but the word that kept popping into my head as he was talking was pride, right? Having pride in being good at engine company work, and that company officer really setting the bar and setting the tone for how much that you need to know the intricacies of that apparatus. And all those, that was probably just 2 or 3 years ago you were riding the front right seat, right, Chief?
No.
I was trying to save myself from my old guy comment earlier.
Well, one of my favorite bands was called Old and in the Way. It was an old rockabilly, Grateful Dead combination kind of band, and I'm old and in the way. But I'm still a full-time volunteer firefighter. I love working with everybody. I think that this is the greatest job in the world. It's the best job I ever had. It's the best thing I've ever done, bar none. I'm hoping that I'm a Catholic, unapologetically Catholic. So we believe in a place called purgatory, and I'm hoping that my love of the fire service is taking a little time off my sentence for all the bad things I've done, and I've done a lot of bad things. But the joy I get out of being around guys like Jarrod and you, Brad, and Aaron and Steve and is just amazing, and I'm grateful every day just to be allowed to hang out.
Well, it's neat to hear. It's neat to hear passion. It's neat to hear passion like that, even for somebody that's been involved in the business for so long. Because I think maybe with time, it continues to hit you more and more as the years go by. What a cool thing it is we're all involved in. So, anyways, let's move forward. I want to hear from some of these other guys. Brian, tell us about what some of your go-to things are out in Metro West for drills.
So Metro West is a unique department. You know, you guys talk about engines and trucks and that sort of stuff, and that's great. Unfortunately, we don't have those that in St. Louis County. We have one dedicated truck in St. Louis County. It's a one-station department close to the city. So for us, we kind of have to be the quote-unquote jack of all trades. So for us, we focus a lot of our training on the basics. People always quote, you know, I always tell guys, the basics are the basics, but the basics aren't that simple. So don't be afraid at the company level to tell the guys, hey, we got to pull a line today, or hey, we're gonna throw some ground ladders up on the building. You know, you talk about budgetary times and times being tough for some departments, and you know, maybe they don't have all the props or a training tower and that sort of stuff, but if you can get creative, you know, you can get out to those buildings, and the double benefit of getting around those buildings and pulling hose, you're going to engage the public. So you're going to be out there talking to your actual constituents, the people you're protecting. They see that you're doing something. Get out from behind those fire station doors and talk to people, meet people, tell them what you're all about, and you know, your guys are going to like it too. And then, you know, reward the guys afterwards. You know, make dinner for them, or you know, take them out for ice cream, or a quick cup of coffee or something. You know, make it mutually beneficial. So, but I think those are simple things. You know, take the tools off the truck, look at them, play with them, you know, use them. You know, K-12 saw, you know, we got a guy in my department just started with us, and so he's never cut with an outboard saw. So get a couple pieces of rebar, take and cut it. It's, you know, cheap, and you can get some quality training. So things like that. You know, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel by any means. And if you get on fire engineering, and you can look up any type of training you want, and you're going to find it. So.
When you do your rebar cutting out there, Bri, how do you anchor the rebar, or how are you? Can you get into a little more detail about how you do that?
So
and also, I'm sorry, I'm excited to hear you talk about that, because I think that's really. I watched a video the other day, Bri. If I can find it, I'll send it to you. But it was some cats at a fire, and they're cranking on this garage door and yanking on it and banging on it, and no one thought to bring out a saw. You know what I mean? And which I thought was really interesting. You know, a simple tent cut and bada boom, bada bang. You know what I mean? But so it was really fascinating to me. Could you get a little bit into how you set up a cutting drill? Just for me, I guess, because I'd like to do it.
So, you know, we're pretty fortunate. You know, you ask around the station and you can find almost somebody that can do anything for you. And so we got a guy that's really good at welding. And for less than $100 at our station, we put in a cut station, if you will. And it's got a bunch of screw downs, so we can put metal rebar in, we can put metal plates in, and get through some cutting. Like I said, you know, this guy, he got into it to the point where it came, we just asked him to start doing it, and then next thing you know, this thing comes back and it looks like an actual fire station prop that you'd pay $2,500 for, and $100.
Send me that guy's name when you get a chance off air. I mean, I don't want you to give him up online, because he might get pissed off, but I'm going to hook him up with my buddy Johnny Rigolo out of Virginia Beach, and because we're looking at doing some cutting stuff at FDIC, and maybe we can make this work with some of his ideas and some of the props he built for you guys to show, you know, the rest of us cats how to make this happen, because this is important stuff.
No, it's great, and like I say, it's cheap enough to do, and you get some quality training out of it for, you know, basically the cost of rebar. And in there again, you know, you get into Home Depot and these other places, some of these other big box stores, not that one specific maybe, but go and talk to them. These guys have stuff that they want to give you if you engage them and talk to them and utilize them as a resource in your community. Make them feel like they're part of the team, and you're going to get great assets out of it. So stuff like that, you know, like I say, you don't need to get, you know, we do some of the special operations. I want a rescue engine in my department, so we get into special operations stuff. We had ropes off yesterday, creating 3-to-1s and doing some double Prusik belay stuff. So we get into that, but you know, I still always want to fall back to the basics. If you can't pull the hose off the truck which is what the fire service was built on, then don't try to hang off a rope first. Focus on what's important first, which is the basics.
All right, so we are about halfway through today's webcast, so just a quick reminder, remember hashtag FETalk for some questions. We did get a question on hashtag FETalk earlier we'll address here in a little bit, but before we do, I want to kick it over to my buddy Steve from Albany. We haven't had a chance to hear from Steve yet. So Steve, what are some of your go-to drills up in Albany?
So it's kind of funny that we've talked about a few things already that we've recently just done. And kind of before I get started, I got to give a quick shout out and thank you to the FDMY. I'm here at Fort Totten, Queens right now, taking the first line supervisor training program. So I am with company officers right now from throughout New York State, and we've been basically having these same conversations all week long at lunch, breakfast. So this is just like an extension of it, and the instructors were nice enough to give me a little break to come in and be with you guys today, and basically continuing the same class that I'm in, and we're all sharing ideas here in Queens, New York, and having a great time. So the chief talked about the rope drill. There's buckets of rope in my garage specifically for that drill. We just finished up more of a pump discharge pressure cheat sheet that my guys, we spent 2 days kind of scheduling just us going through and utilizing a pitot gauge as well as some flow meters. So now every discharge on our engine, we know the gallons per minute that we're flowing. The pump operator now knows what the discharge pressure needs to be for each of those lines, and it's in a nice chart, and it looks really good, and I think it's going to make a little bit of a difference. I mean, we still need to know all our friction loss stuff and everything, but at 3 in the morning, and if somebody's calling for more pressure, it's too much. We have a very young job, had a lot of turnover, so it just gives them that extra bit of confidence, and these guys now have had the practice and the time to give that stuff a try. And just like everybody else here has been talking about, we end up doing some special operation stuff with foam, trailers, and as well as a fireboat. I know we were talking about, what do you do when you have another person coming in, either detailed across the floor from another firehouse that you're not used to, and you have these added responsibilities. So I think all these little bits of cheat sheets and reviews you need to work with, and it kind of ties into, I think, the question that Brad is leading up to is, where do you figure out the balance between independent training and group training? And for me, I have to look at the roster in the morning, see who I'm working with, and that'll help me figure out what do we need to focus on that day. Am I getting somebody from a ladder company that hasn't maybe been on an engine company in a while, may end up in a position of being a chauffeur? Well, then I want to go over that flow chart with him or her, and I want to make sure that they understand that maybe it's boating season and they've never been out on the boat at all. They may never even seen it, and I want to make sure that we get over there. But at the same time, I still need to check the training division's calendar and see, do we have any group training, or will this training work out well? Sometimes we can do a lot of independent drills, but sometimes I think a multi-company drill works out really well, maybe with your second due engine or where you simulate, hey, we're first due, you're second due, who's going to do what, and that just makes the fires go so much easier. And it could be just simple supply line drills, or how we're going to really focus on getting that first hand line in operation.
Yeah, excellent. The question that came in on FE Talk that Steve started referring to talked about finding a balance, as Steve just said, finding a balance between group and independent training, and certainly on an interpersonal level, as it relates to physically with people in the firehouse, group training versus individual training. That's one way to look at it. But also, the other aspect of this conversation is self-paced, self-study training, independent study on the computer, and taking classes online, and learning management systems and things along those lines. And so we'll get everybody's thoughts on that as well. I kind of have somewhat of a strong opinion on this, in that sometimes the learning management system folks don't always love to hear it, but there's a significant drawback to that, in that no matter how hard you try, it doesn't matter how many little red arrows you embed in the presentation to have to click forward to make sure that you're still sitting at your computer. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, you're going to have firefighters that are going to start that training, start that video, get up, go to the bathroom, go get a cup of coffee, do whatever, right? And they just walk back through every once in a while, because believe it or not, it's not that overly interesting. You know, their bloodborne pathogens refresher for this particular year is not any more invigorating than it was last year, and they're just simply you know, kind of checking the box. And so there's some training that lends itself to that. But if I've always said over the years that if there's something you really want them to know, something that's a life or death type of thing, it's absolutely got to be in person, dynamically delivered, with question and answer, live on the drill ground or on the apparatus bay floor. And so I don't want to speak against the concept of learning management systems and online-based training, but I always caution people to be very, very cautious and weary of that. And if nothing else, let that be a catalyst for a follow-up training, right? Start with that and then immediately move to the drill ground, or you know, use that as a catalyst for conversation. And I'll use an example. All the training minutes videos on fire engineering are tremendous, right? Short little 5-minute, 10-minute clips that are not the training in and of themselves to me, but are the catalyst to start the conversation for you to then watch that video, talk amongst yourselves at the company level, and then immediately move out to go do some more stuff, right? And there's all kinds of great resources like that, and Training Minutes is absolutely fantastic when we use those all the time. So what are you guys' thoughts on using alternative resources, whether they be videos or learning management systems, and how that interacts with training at the company level? Aaron?
Sure. Well, I think that you brought some good points up. If we have canned programs that are simply sitting there and you know, click and point, basically, it's going to get abused. Especially if it's something that isn't very catchy, it's not going to grab the guys. So I'm not a big fan of canned programs. I understand that, you know, we were talking about, you know, bloodborne pathogens, lockout, tagout, things like that. I have no problem with that. Doing that individually online, signing off on it, it's not going to be the same. But when we're talking engine company ops, or we're talking saw operations, or rescue tools, or something of that nature, I believe that you need the crews together. And I believe that the bosses, the captains and lieutenants, the company officers need to convey to the crew what they expect, how they expect. Listen, even if it's nothing but body positioning on a line, maybe it's you know, how I want you to lead off with your cribbing on an extrication call. I just think that you still need that in our job. You can get away with a lot of web-based training in other professions. This profession lends itself to that. Now, do I use the videos? I use Training Minutes constantly. I think that they are a great part of what we do, and the fact that fire engineering has them for us to go back on with the archives is a home run. I do the same thing with archived articles. You know, we have hundreds and hundreds of articles that have been archived throughout the years in fire engineering and wherever else you want to find them. I give them to my guys, you know, and I tell them, listen, these are parts of why we as a department, or me as a company officer, have this philosophy, and this is why I expect the line in this place, or this is why I want it done this way. And I give credit to the authors who taught me that stuff 10, 15, 20 years ago at FDIC or wherever. So, yeah, I believe there is an interactive place. There's a place for interactive web-based training. But it does not replace, and I've seen training officers around the country who thought they could save money and they could do it with a system and everything else. You need to conjoin them. They have to be brought together. One does not replace the other, and vice versa.
Chief Holton, what do you think? Do you think there's as somebody that's in charge of generating a lot of this content that then gets turned around and used as company drills across the country, do you think there are any cautionary tales or any potential pitfalls of relying on it too much? Where should that balance be?
Oh, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I'm just kidding. Hey. I forgot to mention it's going to be our 140th birthday, November 17th. 140 years of publishing fire engineering. And one of the thof that, to this point exactly, that we've prided ourselves in is that we try to put out all of the voices of the fire service, as our original tagline said, devoted to the interests, and at the time it said, of the firemen of the nation. Today, devoted to the interests of firefighters worldwide. So when we talk about the electronic stuff, for an old guy like Aaron, you know, it's hard for him to connect. You know, I know he's looking at his flip phone right now, trying to figure out how to. I'm just teasing you, but you know, we have to use all these. You have to use everything, and I'll tell you what. I love the webcasts. I love the training minutes. I love the drills that Forrest Reader and others put up there that we put out. You know, the stuff that we're getting, the Mayday Monday that we put out every week. That is phenomenal stuff. You know, we're doing so much stuff online that's really valuable stuff, and it's hitting a tremendous audience. You know, I still love to read, so I love the printed mag. I really just enjoy holding it, and so that's one way to reach people, and I think that's really critical stuff. So I think that when we're talking about company level training, you want to be wide open to all of it and embrace it all. So I think at Darren's point, there's some stuff that you can't rely solely on any one. I wouldn't rely solely on any one methodology for any kind of training. You have to wrap your, even when you're talking about well, even if you're talking about something, well, this would be an interesting company level training deal, and I don't know how to really context it. So, excuse me if this isn't really well said. Maybe Steve or Brad or one of you, someone else can kind of see where I'm going with this. But when we talk about a firefighter's most important traits, curiosity, empathy, a sense of duty, how do you bring that into a drill? You know what I mean? To take the where what stuff out, and just how do we talk about drilling on interpersonal skills? How do you do that? And do you do enough of that? I mean, at the end of the day, we always talk about it's not how well you did something, it's how well you intended to do it, and did that come across? I mean, I see guys throwing stones at folks. Videos online of them performing a drill or an evolution or responding to a citizen's fire or event and critiquing it. Well, their motivation to me is a lot more important than their technical competence. Technical competence is critical, and we should always strive for perfection. But in that striving for perfection, I think we sometimes frighten people or discourage people from just doing the best they can at the moment. And what Steve said about having to be jacks of all trades in one company, man, that lifted my heart, because everybody better have that mentality. I don't care if you're sitting on the FDNY right now on truck 111 or 123. If you think that's all you need to know, you're sadly mistaken, because at any given point in time in any fire department anywhere in the world, you could be just as called upon as Steve's guys to be able to be versatile at every aspect of this job and to be able to innovate and create. And that's more about having your heart in it and having a real sense of duty. So I don't know, does that's probably kind of, I spend a lot of time alone.
No, that's good, and I'll tell you something that conversation or that discussion kind of brought up in my head is not necessarily specifics to the interpersonal relationship aspect of it, but at least the sense of duty is that sometimes maybe that's a chicken or the egg thing. Maybe as opposed to a sense of duty leading to company level training, in some cases maybe a lot of company level training and putting that emphasis there and building that company pride over a period of time by knowing your district and having a pride in your skills and things like that. Maybe sometimes emphasizing that company level training can lead to more of a sense of duty and more of a sense of pride in the company, you know, maybe training are those drills are the building blocks to achieve that higher calling or that higher sense of duty. Maybe that's another way to look at it as well. But that's great stuff. Let's keep on going down the line, and let's get Brian. Brian, let's get your thoughts on individual versus group training and kind of how you find that balance and any other maybe electronic means or whatever that you like to use.
Yeah, there's a lot of electronic stuff out there, and we do use it. It's not a bad thing. To Chief's point, you know, we work as a team, and when you start to create more individuality, which the United States seems like, you know, across the world, I'm sure everybody's doing it. You know, it's easy to just send something out, get it done, check the box, and let's move on. And unfortunately, this isn't a checkbox industry. We can't just check boxes, say, hey, you got it done, and we're moving forward. You know, I had a learning management system when I was starting here, and it was called a strong company officer. And he taught me everything that I needed to know to be safe on the fire ground. And there was no sitting in front of a computer and learning it. It was, you know, getting out on the side of the fire trucks, pulling equipment off at 3 and 4 in the afternoon, and getting dirty. And I credit that guy with where I'm at today. So I try to emulate a lot of that stuff. And when you're working together and everybody's doing stuff together, you're coming together as a team, and you're going to be strong as a company, and you're going to perform well on the fire grounds, and that's important. And like, you know, Chief Halton said, it's, you know, that to get those guys out there, talking to them, and not just showing them what you know, but why you're so passionate. You know, we got probably 6 or 7 of the most passionate guys on this panel right now, which is incredible. And feel fortunate to be one of those people and show those guys, these new guys coming into it, you know, when you're doing these company trainings, why that is so important, why we're taking the time to change that saw from an inboard to an outboard. Not like, hey, just cut with it, but why is that important? Why are we doing these things we're doing? So, you know, there's online stuff's great, and I use the heck out of it, don't get me wrong, but it's not a substitute for a lot of things. So,
excellent, Brian. Thank you. So, Jarrod, I see a lot of stuff on social media from you, on your personal Facebook page and on your Trial by Fire Facebook page. I see a lot of pictures of a lot of training, and I don't see a whole lot of guys sitting in front of computers. So give me your thoughts on this.
So, I do enjoy the learning management systems that are out there. I think they're a great tool, as we've all said. You know, I had some experience with them when I was in the training center. I developed a few. We rolled them out as far as like an in-service, and that was our department-wide in-service. So 500 people were tasked with watching this video. And like you mentioned, you have to be careful. You know, if this is a topic or you know, content that needs questions and answers and explanation and everything like that, you know, you can only do so much on a video. And what I'll say to the videos is, one is be careful how long it is. You know, my limit was 30 minutes, and that can even be kind of long. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my God, Jarrod, what the hell, man, another 45-minute presentation. So I said, man, maybe I'm screwing up here and I need to make them shorter. So definitely consider the time limit. And then the other thing is, you know, we're going to pin the company officer against the wall again. You know, if we do happen to get those videos that, you know, maybe we feel like we need a little more, or we catch ourselves saying, hey, you know, this should have been a hands-on. Well, then get out there, you know. You know, if you're going to sit around and wait for your training center to give everything to you, you can be waiting around a long time. So, you know, I'll use, you know, building construction for an example. You know, we task out a 25-minute lecture or a presentation on, you know, refreshing of building construction and modern building construction, if somebody catches themselves saying, well, I can't believe they didn't give us a walkthrough or whatever, well, get your butts out of the firehouse and go take a look. It once again falls on that company officer. So again, I think a mix of both. As long as you don't rely too heavy on the online stuff. We mentioned simulation. We do simulation as well, so we have fire and EMS simulation, which I think is really good, and I think it's a benefit, especially with the fact that we're just not going to a lot of fires anymore. And take for example a guy who's working on his acting book. 10, 15, 20 years ago, a guy working on his acting company officer book was able to get those fires under his or her belt, and they got that experience. As we're now, they may work on their acting book for a year, and they're not doing much. So those simulations, I feel like, are a benefit, and I've seen them help people who are just, it's not their fault. They aren't getting the experience that they want. So those simulations fill the gap. So again, just a mix of everything. Another good thing, we talked about a lot of good engine drills and special ops drills. We're very fortunate where I work. Big Navy town. We have a lot of ships, shipyards. We have the USS Wisconsin, which is a huge battleship that sits there. So those guys, they're great. They let us get on their ships. We crawl over them. We do all kinds of rope work in confined space. So we're extremely fortunate when it comes to that. But like I said before, mix it up. We use the heck out of our whiteboard. And that's one thing. Somebody mentioned, tailor the training to the people you have. There's plenty of times where I've checked the roster and I'm like, this person's gone or this person's filling in. I had this training scheduled for today, but I'm not going to do that today because maybe this group of people just did that, or I'm going to wait until a few more shifts go by where I can, do the most that's there when it comes to this training topic. So you got to pay close attention to who's out there that day and what kind of training you're gonna provide. And again, you feel the pulse of your crew. There's plenty of times where we've been very just doing a lot of stuff going on. You can kind of sense that if I were to just spring a drill on them, they'd be like, oh man, here we go, this guy's killing us. So I mix it up. Maybe we'll go in the galley, we'll do something on the whiteboard for 15 minutes. It's short, it's relevant, 15, 20 minutes. We talk about flowing or ladder placement, or we'll go over a line of duty death report. Something like that I think is just a great way to mix it up and keep it fresh, so people just they don't feel like they're overwhelmed or anything like that.
Excellent. Just write 29.7 d squared square root p on the whiteboard, and then start going to town, right? Talking about
right.
Flow and hydraulics and stuff like that. You can spend a couple hours in there blowing some minds with math.
Oh, yes.
Steve, let's kick it to you. Do you guys use a lot of video-based or web-based stuff in Albany, and how do you find that balance?
So we do use a learning management system, and it's great for certain portions. I think when you're talking learning management systems, they're not meant for companies. They're meant for individuals. So it is not at all, to me, a company-level training. Maybe there's some components, you take one and you see something in it and you want to bring that back and go through it, that's fine. But I agree with I like the fire engineering training minutes. We will say listen to somebody's audio of a fire that maybe we find online. Not too long ago, when it was pretty cold out, one of our inside drills was, we listened to a Mayday in Boston, and we listened to it as a group, and we each then talked about what we thought we heard, at what point we thought things were getting worse, listening to the pitch of people's voices, and then maybe transitioning that into, okay, we have to go out on a run now. How do we operate? How do we call a Mayday? What's the best thing to be doing with our radios? And how does that interact with what happened there? Is there something that we could do different to maybe make that Mayday situation a little bit better than maybe what somebody else had happen? And then, back to the question of individual versus group. Individual, we're a company, we are a team. So at some point, we all need to have that same training. And I think a neat way to be able to have a little bit of a combination of the two is to take some training articles or a training video. Maybe an article out of fire engineering. I know, and hopefully I can make a couple photocopies and not get all jammed up here for handing them out to my guys.
That's absolutely legal.
Yes,
that's an important point. No, for everybody watching, you can copy articles for educational purposes for one-time use, which is absolutely legal. That there's no copyright law against doing that for educational purposes. So if anybody out there is listening and you're in a training academy, you're allowed to do that. That's absolutely legal. What's illegal is if you reproduce them and hand them out and you're at a training event that's being paid for or that's generating income. But if you just want to copy an article and hand it out in the classroom, you're allowed to do that. That's a legal thing to do.
I was only just teasing, but you're absolutely correct. And one of the best things about doing that is I think you get, when you hand it out, I ask each of them to read it, and then later on during the day, we all get together as a group for a few minutes. Might be after dinner and having a cup of coffee around the kitchen table, and just say, what do you think about that? What do you get out of that? Or how does that apply to maybe, we've talked about our community before, and how does that apply to our territory, our first due area, and how can we make that all work based on that article or that video? And so let's get some independent thought from each of the team members and then bring them all together to see who's got those ideas, and I think that works out really well for us.
Yeah, I think that is an important discussion to have, and I'm glad Chief Halton threw that in there about the ability to make copies for a single event use and things like that. And something that you've got to keep in mind, and everybody out there that's tuning in has to keep in mind, if you're struggling for where to start with company level training, it's already done for you. The stuff is out there. There are drills. There are drills on Brian does a lot of drills for fire engineering, the throwback to basics drills and things like that. There are already a lot of things out there with simple internet searches on the fire service websites, on Google, whatever the case may be. Don't feel like you're starting from scratch and have a sense of despair if you really want to kick it up a notch at your company level training, because resources are there. There's a tremendous amount of resources there. We've already talked about the training minutes videos, about the drills that are printable, available online. Just simply starting with the cover picture every month on fire engineering, whatever building is on fire. Hey, let's talk about this. Give me a size up. Give me some tactical priorities here. Where's our first hose line going to go? Where are our occupants potentially trapped? Using the real estate section in the Sunday paper is something that I've talked about for several years, and looking at buildings in your own first due jurisdiction and guessing what the building layout is, and then simply reading the description of the building in the real estate section to see if you were right. Kind of get that instant confirmation. So there's all kinds of stuff out there to get started with. You just simply have to have the inspiration and the passion to get it going. So we're almost out of time here. One quick little plug as we go. Again, I'll mention it again. If you go to isfsi.org and check out the information for our fall conference in Cincinnati coming up in the end of September, it's going to be a great conference. The ISFSI has the great privilege that Chief Halton and the folks at Penwell Fire Engineering have us on every month, first Wednesday of the month, to do this Humpday Hangout. So we're very grateful to Chief for doing that. So my name is Brad French, as I said, from Dayton, Ohio, and a board member of ISFSI. So I just wanted to sign off myself, and I'm going to kick it to Aaron and Chief Halton for a brief little sign off and send us off for the day.
All right. Well, thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. This was another one of those Wednesday afternoons that I think impacts people in the fire service, whoever gets a chance to listen to these, and weren't listening to it today, maybe they're listening to it when it's archived, because these are things that we need to always be talking about. And this is what newer training officers and even some seasoned training officers have to think about. Bobby was right. Technology for me, oh man, I have to really look at it closely, because this gray and this mustache wasn't just from my hard paper route. It's from being around in firehouses for a long time. So changing the ideas on things is part of it. I can tell you one little quick thing before I go. My Proby that I just got watches fire engineering videos. he watches speeches of FDIC speakers. You know, the first day in the firehouse, he watched Ray's speech because he needed to know why I was as passionate as I am about getting him where he needs to be. And he watched Andy Fredericks a week later. So these are the things that we need to do to carry on and train our guys so they're going to be the next. Somebody's got to replace me. Hopefully it's not for quite a long time, but I want them to be better than I was. And I hope that that's what we do as a panel here. So I appreciate the chance. And guys, it was great seeing you again. And who's next?
That would be me. And so thank you so much for listening today. Hey, a couple of cool books that I've gotten recently that I'd like to share. Fire Thieves by Michael Brigatti. It's kind of neat. It's not a training book. It's a novel written by a fire captain, dedicated to his son Matt, who passed away while the captain was writing this book. And $1 from every copy goes to the National Fallen Firefighters. So I just started it. It's a neat book. It's a work of it's a fiction book, but it's a cool book and written by a firefighter. So pretty neat stuff. That's Fire Thieves by Mike Brigatti, Brigatti. So pretty neat, and thank you, Mike, for sending it to me. And then my good friends Dan Carrigan and Jim Moss, Firefighter Functional Fitness. Looks like a great book. I just started it. You know, they were kind enough to send it to me. A couple of neat guys taught for us at FDIC. They'll be teaching for us again. They're really into the whole fitness thing, and nothing's more important than your physical fitness, your mental health, your health in general. So you know, everything you can get your hands on to improve that, make sure you do that. And so, quick plug out, those are not fire engineering books or Penwell books. Those are just great books. So please avail yourselves of those. Thank you for joining us, and we know you got really important things to do with your time, so we really appreciate the fact that you joined us. If you have ideas about shows you'd like to see, please contact myself or Brad or Aaron or any of the hosts. If you have any concerns about anything, you can get a hold of me anytime. My phone number is 201-406-8278. That's 201-406-8278. One of the things we're doing, and I'd like to ask you to kind of share with us, fire engineering in November will be 140 years old. That's 140 years old. 140 years old. Since 1877. We'd kind of like to know what fire engineering meant in your life or your career, or what it means in your life or your career now, and maybe give us a shout out, a happy birthday if you don't mind, online or on Twitter with the hashtag 140 years devoted to the interests of firefighters worldwide. Kind of a big hashtag, but we'll shorten that to something, or maybe FE 140 years. But if you think about doing that, if you're interested in doing that, contact me. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Put it up online on fire engineering and get it out there. But that's a pretty big milestone. Also, FDIC will be 90 years of serving the interests of firefighters. So thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Thank you to all the guests, Steve, Jarrod, Brad, everybody for spending their afternoon with us. I can't tell you how grateful I am to all of you. And I'm out of here. Be careful out there.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you next month.